we want to welcome you to our new podcast, Exceptional Educators Playbook. I'm Chastity Kraft, the literacy consultant here at KVEC, and I have with me my fellow consultants, and we'll start with the only male in the room and let him introduce, and we'll go around the table.
I'm Doug Smith, behavior consultant.
Stephanie Kidd, math consultant.
I'm Vonda Adams, math consultant.
And I'm Cheryl Mathis, the low incidence consultant here at KVEC.
So every month we're going to highlight a different topic that every educator needs to know. Each week that topic is going to be broken down into content-specific categories. Week 1 will explain what it will look like in literacy. Week 2 is going to show you how it works in math. Week 3 allows you to look at the topic through the social, emotional, and behavior lens. And then week 4 is going to offer modifications and models for the low incidence community. We're going to be discussing instructional strategies, educational tools that you can use with your students, and also throw in a few tales from the trenches as we go along. Because in this room we got a lot of combined years in that classroom, and we hopefully we can throw some insights and some funny stories for you. You'll also have the opportunity to share your successes and ideas and questions so that we can all learn from each other. We have a QR code at the front of the table. As that if you don't care to sign in, so we can see who all joins us. And also, if you're not watching us live and you go back and watch the recorded version, we ask that you, if you want to sign in as well, we'll take those and we can add you to an email list and send you out the links for our future podcast as we go along. So if you want to be signing in while we go on. So today we're going to be talking about formative assessment. We're going to look at what is it, why is it important, and how do we use it. Those are the 3 keys for any for our formative assessment. So should I start off with the definition, the actual formal definition? I'm just going to read you a specific word for word definition of how, based on the Council of Chief State School Officers formative assessment for students and teachers. And then we're going to just kind of talk about what it means for teachers and students. So it reads, formative assessment is a planned ongoing process used by all students and teachers during learning and teaching to elicit and use evidence of student learning to improve student understanding of intended disciplinary learning outcomes and support students to become self-directed learners. Now that is a big old mouthful of a definition. So we're going to just talk about what that means, what that really means, and for you and your students. So does anybody want to start off?
I'll go ahead and start. I think for me, formative assessment means that you're gauging where your students are, you're looking at what they need to know, and you're looking at ways that you can ensure that they are learning these specific learning targets by the activities that you're using to give those to those kids. And you're gauging at where they're at, what they need to know, and what progress they're making toward that goal. So I think formative assessment is those quick, easy little checks of understanding to see that the kids are getting the material as you hope they would.
Yeah, when I think of formative assessment, I think of the word is to inform. It's to inform me of how my students are doing during that lesson, because it's not summative. It's not at the end of a chapter. It's not at the end of the year. But informative is to inform me right then of what my students know, what do I need to change, and how do I need to move on. That's what I think of when I think of informative assessments.
Right, it just gives the teacher an idea of where the kids are at and what my next steps are. Because you have to be constantly on your toes, and of course you're only going to get that by getting feedback from your kids. So not only do we need feedback from them, but we have to give them that feedback. It has to be something they can go right then and work on and fix, and not give them an overload of things. Because if we wait until the very end of a lesson, that's a lot of feedback they're going to have to go back and address. So we want to do it in small little increments, a little spaced out, and give that feedback that way.
And that's the key, is immediate.
Yes.
It gives you immediate information on what you need to reteach or what they know, and then you may have to change your lesson midstream and do something different
Right.
and go back and reteach. And I think you could do definitely start out with before, and I mean a minimum before, during, and after. But you may want to, like you said, it could be several times based on
Yeah.
what skill or
Exactly.
what you're wanting them to know. And it doesn't have to be anything elaborate. It's just those are quick checks is
Yeah.
another term I think you
Right.
could use for that, for formative
Definitely.
assessments.
And then I think you need to think about not only, okay, you look and see what they're lacking, what skill they're needing to work on. Well, you don't address it, give the feedback, and then move on. Then you have to formatively assess again to see, did they get it, or do I need to try a different approach, a different method, do it a different way? So it's not only is it just throughout a lesson, but once you have to make that stop for a child, then then that's another skill that you're gonna have to assess again with that child to make sure they're ready to move on. even.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
really, it's kind of like a GPS. It tells you every move to make and when to make it, because if students get it, well, then you know you can move on. But if they don't get it, hey, you got to stop and think through this and really change that instruction to where students can get the content.
Right.
Yeah, I think, like I said, it just helps you to adjust your teaching style. If a student didn't get it by using the kinesthetic method or visual method, then you have to adjust your teaching style and present that material in a different way so that all students, not just 3 or 4, but all students have
Yeah.
that opportunity to access that curriculum and that material.
That's a
Well,
good point. All students.
Yeah, Doug said exactly what we needed to say. You don't just do the same lesson over and over again. You don't do it louder.
Right.
That's not how it's gonna work. We have to actually change. We have to adapt that lesson. So at some point, if I did it this way and we did maybe paper pencil this time, what are we gonna do the next time? And it may be we're pulling out the sand trays, we're pulling out something else to get that student involved, and maybe it's a program that the student likes that maybe we can find a way to teach it that way. So finding and adapting that lesson however we need to reteach.
Definitely.
Yeah, so that's pretty much what it is. So I think we've established what it is. So now let's talk about why is it important. So Ms. Vonda, why is it important?
Well, like I had alluded to earlier, it is so important for us to know, first of all, where our kids are at. Like, you know, I love analogies, and Cheryl talked about the GPS. Well, first of all, we have to know where we're at
Yeah.
before we set our GPS. So we have to know where the kids are at, and then we have to monitor as we travel along. Are we getting to the destination we want to get to? So first of all, of course, that means we've got to have our goals, those learning goals. Those have to be understood. And then, are we getting to those goals or not? Have we veered off and gone down the wrong pathway, or do we need to back up and pick up and see, do we have an issue? You know, was there a flat tire, or did we run out of gas, or those types of things, to use that same analogy. And so we've got to stop and we've got to correct those mistakes, and that guides and leads our instruction. The kids determine how we're going to teach. We don't plan out a lesson and it go beautifully the way that we want it to go. I've been in education 33 years. I don't know if there's ever been a lesson that went exactly the way I planned it to go. There was always those little bumps in the road where I had to stop and address what was going on because somebody needed a different way or a different strategy, or for it to be repeated in a different way, or maybe for another child to explain it to them. Sometimes that will help
Yep.
when we're trying to find another way to get something across.
Yeah.
And sometimes I have learned too, you'll be talking about, like I always taught language arts and speak a vocabulary word that's not truly a vocabulary word, but you mention it in your conversation and they don't even know what that means. So once you find it through that formative assessment, they missed it, but then you have to analyze why they missed it, and then you realize they didn't really know what you were asking because of that one word. They didn't know what that meant. So then you gotta go back and reteach the vocabulary piece that you didn't even intend on teaching.
Exactly.
So it's just really interesting about that. But flexibility is key in it.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, another thing is if I'm teaching and my students not understanding, there are going to be behavior issues that's going to come up because they're frustrated.
Good
Yeah.
point.
They're so frustrated with, I can't do this, I don't understand this, why am I not understanding this, and so is getting it. And we all know kids are at different levels all the time. We don't have a classroom of perfectly level 5 or level 10 kids, whatever it may be, but they're all at different levels. So if I'm frustrated over here and I don't know what's going on, or I don't know the vocabulary, then I'm going to either act out or I'm going to shut down.
Yeah.
There's going to be 2 options there. So engaging your kids that way too, about, do you see the frustration starting to build? Is this too hard of a lesson for them? Do I need to move back in that lesson? That's all part of your formative assessment.
I think
Definitely.
the engagement there also, with formative assessment, it gives you that opportunity as a teacher to engage your students more in activities that's going to judge or to show their progress. And if they have those little bitty steps of success along the way, it's going to be very motivating to those kids, and to you as an educator as well. It's going to motivate you because you're seeing those kids progress and they're seeing their progress that they're being made. And formative assessment also helps you to clarify learning goals and targets that you need to meet in order to make sure that they are achieving at the highest level possible for them.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think it's so crucial to understand those learning goals and those targets that you have for students, because if you don't really know where the student's going and what the learning goal is, it's kind of hard to get them there and measure that along the way.
Yeah, and it's important for them to understand what those learning goals are too, because you need to know, they need to know what success looks like.
Yep, I agree.
How am I gonna know that I have learned what I'm supposed to learn unless we, give them examples, non-examples, those types of things as well too.
Excellent point.
Well, if we've clarified our learning goal and we've provided them with the clear feedback that they need, and if you think about it, and we've adjusted learning, most of the time the kids are going to start making some progress. They're going to start succeeding. And what happens when you succeed? It gives you hope. You want to work toward a better goal. So that's a big thing for our students, is giving them that hope.
And providing students with that daily feedback, of an activity, or that daily feedback after a lesson is completed. It goes a long way in reinforcing what you've been teaching, plus it reinforces, like you said, the progress they're making, the small steps in success.
Yeah.
And it provides them with that.
Yeah, and then of course the kids we also want them to be able to monitor their progress, monitor to see if they're getting toward that goal, if they're learning what we intended for them to learn. So that's also an important piece of formative assessment. And sometimes that's forgotten, that kids need to learn how to monitor their own learning, that self-monitoring piece.
Yeah.
So we also need to remember that as well.
Yeah, and I think Doug kind of talked a little bit about students understanding when they've hit that target, and then Stephanie touched on the hope, and that goes really to that emotional piece of students feeling successful and feeling like, well, hey, I can do this. It was a struggle, but yeah, I can do this. So I think that goes along so well with just the emotional concepts and giving kids that feeling of success.
When we were going through this and looking at doing our reading, that's what I was looking for. I wanted to actually read the quote, and we've read through so much I don't know where it is, but it was something kind of interesting, and it basically said, somebody had quoted, I've never met a student that didn't want to learn. They may not want to learn how you're teaching them or what you're teaching them at that time, but if you can hone in on that using those little assessments, then you can tweak it and add a little flair, add a little, the different pieces to make it interesting for them, because kids want to learn. It's just, like I have already said, they all learn differently, they have different interests, so these formative assessments are important because that helps us see a true picture of how to answer those questions that we would have for those.
Well, Vonda actually says it best. She says learning is its own motivation. And she said that from the very beginning when we've done our math lessons with teachers, that you don't have to give them stickers, you don't have to give them, but give them that feedback, You don't have to give them candy. That was the other thing we were talking about. You don't have to give any of that, but give them that feedback that they need. Show them they're making progress. And how are you going to do that? By giving those little formative assessments. And you talked about doing it daily in a math class, every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and that's a natural reinforcer. You could give them candy, but you may not have candy on Monday. So that it's just a natural reinforcer when kids learn something and then they feel good about themselves.
And it provides students also with that a feeling of taking ownership in their learning
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
as well. So,
That's a
you
good
know,
point.
once you take ownership into the learning, then you're more apt to buy into what the teacher's selling or whatever, because you are invested in that, because that's what, you know, look what I'm doing, what I'm capable of doing.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, provides that motivation, engagement, and just that opportunity to succeed.
Sure, it's just those intrinsic rewards, you know, and that's what my kids would do. You know, I taught primary, and they were used to stickers and candy and those kinds of things, and they say, well, what we get? I said, well, how do you feel about what you did? Good. I said, there's your reward. Isn't that feel good? Yeah. So,
Vaughn didn't have any candy.
So-
I can tell you.
No.
Or
No,
stickers.
no candy.
I want a candy.
No candy,
Jolly
no
Rancher.
stickers.
We'll go into, because I'm kind of looking, we got about 15 minutes left, and we want to show them how we use it. And also during this virtual time, we want to talk about virtual formative assessments and some virtual pieces for them, as well as when we get back in the classroom, how they can do that. So we've talked about what it is and why it's important, and we want to spend the last little bit of how do we use those what formative assessments, what are some examples of those formative assessments, and how they can use them in person and virtually. Okay. All right, I guess I'll go.
If I'm thinking in the classroom, of course we got the paddles, right?
Right.
We hold up our paddles. That's one way.
Definitely.
And then if I think of another way in the classroom that I've seen a lot of educators use is Kahoots.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
they use
Yeah.
that to do that. And then thatquiz.com for mathematics is a good one, because kids can get on there and like less than 5 minutes they've taken a little assessment, and the teacher can schedule that assessment. They know exactly what the kid made. The kid knows what it made. That's a really good one because they get feedback right then.
Yeah.
So I like that one.
And I think too, as far as virtual, with some of the program or platforms or whatever you want to call it, they're using, you know, you got the reactions, the thumbs up, a
Yes.
yes or no,
Tools.
and things like that you can use. But just thinking, if you are, even if you're not, even virtually, you could still do like whiteboards or response cards. You could still use those things to help with that. The thumbs up, the thumbs down. You know, you could still use those, and you could use the put them into the breakout rooms and stuff to do think, pair, share, or turn to your neighbor, shoulder partners, and things like that. So you could adapt some of these informal formative assessments ideas to the virtual setting. It just takes a little bit of thinking, I guess you could.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of it. Like you said, those boards and writing it on paper, you can do that virtually the same as if you were in the classroom. And and we had talked about this way back at the beginning, like in March, is when we're looking at techniques and especially design instruction for our kids, we wanted to keep it consistent as much as possible as what we were doing in the classroom.
Yeah.
So those things that could be the same, we want to keep those the same. However, technology is awesome, and if you want to do, like, a Kahoot is a great one. I'm glad you mentioned that one. And then that's something that you can also carry back into your classroom once you get there. So the transitioning from one to the other should hopefully be as seamlessly as possible, because our kids have a hard time with change sometimes.
Well, and I think the Google tools offer lots of flexibility with the Google Forms and those kinds of things that students could participate in. And I think you could even make interactive Google Slides and things like that to really find out what kids know and what kids are learning. And since kids are at home and, you know, hopefully have more access to technology than maybe before, I know lots of districts have purchased Chromebooks and different things like that. Kids can even make videos to share what they know. So lots of options technology-wise.
Well, and just email me or chat.
Yeah.
If you're in Zoom, just chat your answer, and it can be specifically to someone, you know. So there's that option too. And then you've got Pear Deck that's embedded in Google Slides that you could use. And then Padlet, of course, that you can embed pretty much anywhere if you needed to. There's
all
another
that's
one I
free.
think called Branching Forms is another one that you can use. And then, of course, the polling that's in Zoom.
Oh yeah,
That's
I
a
love the
perfect one.
polling. Yeah, polling's really good, and the thing I love about that, speaking of formative assessment, you can even share that with the entire class, the results after everybody puts in their answer. So it's a pretty awesome on-the-spot tool that you can have ready to go prior to the class.
I I think using those tools is great, and we're looking at, you know, students being at home in that setting. Also, if you could get the support from the parents, you know, and providing those parents, you as the teacher or the educators, providing those parents with that help, and you know, if they have questions or whatever, but getting that support, making that a team effort with the parents, then that would help a lot, because you know, sometimes they're competing for computer time, they're competing for bandwidth, they're competing for mom and daddy's got to work, who's going to help me with my homework. I've got an older sister that's got to do math, and I got to do my science, and then little brother's got to do something else. So just take into account and be compassionate when you're working with the parents, and understanding that, you know, even though we're in the world of technology, it's still going to be difficult for some of those folks to be able to do the things that we're asking them to do. I mean, I couldn't do the math that, you know, that my son was taking calculus, and he brought home a calculus book. He said, "What do you think, Dad?" I said, "Well, you should have got an English version, is what I think." So, you know, that was over my head. But he's like, "Okay, all right." So, but I'm just saying, some of our parents and our grandparents, and maybe great grandparents, may have difficulty doing that stuff. I would struggle with the math. So, you know, but just be aware of that, and just be aware of some of the situations their little fellows are in.
Absolutely.
And check in on them with their as far as, you know, ask them how they're doing. What's working good for you? What's difficult? What can we do to help you? What can we do to make it better for you? And just be aware of things like that, because, you know, like I said, technology is great, but if they don't know how to use the technology, then you're just spinning your wheels.
Yeah, it's true. I was in a virtual meeting a few weeks ago, and there was some discussion about a particular school that was not in our region, but they were having meetings once a month with the parent, the regular ed teacher, special ed teacher, whoever was servicing that student, and just saying, "Hey, how's it going?" And that was really the topic of that meeting, is how's it going? What are the barriers? How can we help? So I thought that was a pretty genius idea, just to meet once a month, just to have an informal talk about how's it going.
Well, that kind of leads into what I was sitting here thinking, because sometimes the best formative assessment, or whatever you want to call it, is to just schedule that one-on-one time with that kid, just 2 or 3 minutes, just a check-in. And so you can not only, because, you know, your formative assessments, you can, of course, we think skills or content, but also you got to make sure, like Doug said, to check in on that social emotional piece, because they're not going to share with you and with the whole class something that's going on, and we all know that, because we've been there. And a lot of times the special ed people are there, I guess, because for whatever reason they tend to open up to special ed teachers more, because you have that, I don't know why, but anyway, so just scheduling, if you are fortunate enough to be able to schedule just individual sessions with them to check in to see how they're doing, you can get a lot of information from that.
And just real quick, I think one of the reasons that they're more willing to open up to us as special educators was because we build those relationships with those kids. We try to take into consideration what's happened to them, what they're going through, and what can we do to help you have a better day at school. And I think that's one of the reasons that those kids open up to us a lot more. So
they do, and I think they learn really fast that people who truly care about them and advocate for them, because we've gotten tickled because I had a parent call me and said that her kid came home and said that I was his lawyer because he came to me crying because, you know, something had happened in the classroom, and it was early in the year. The teacher wasn't aware that he had modifications, so he had his break taken. So once she was aware of that, then he didn't get his break took. So he was able to go outside. So I was his lawyer because I won that case, and he got to go outside. So
you missed your calling.
All right, back on track.
But, you know, we were talking earlier about doing some of our formative assessments, but the big thing is keeping whatever routine you had with doing your formative assessment. So if you had the kids to flash up your cards like you were talking about, you know, we have those cards and we just want to flash them up. If you've got a routine that you flash them up when your hand goes up, you need to keep those same routines when you're doing that with the Zoom. So keeping those routines going, and it'll help you back even when you bring kids back in the classroom, because if we're doing them now, they already know when we get back in the classroom, guess what?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna show my card until the count of three. 1, 2, 3, my card goes up.
Yeah.
Those kind of things.
And I think Cheryl said, made a good side comment there, routine and consistency. Keep that routine, keep that consistency, and it'll be a smoother transition back into, and it's not gonna be perfect, of course, but it'll be a lot smoother transition back into in-person classes, than if you just let them, do whatever. So I think that's a good point.
So, well, anything else, guys?
I think we covered it.
Have we come to the end?
Well,
We've got about
I guess,
5 minutes.
well, that
That's
time
perfect.
works out, cause we're got all of our info in, and, so I guess we're ready to end, but we wanna thank you guys for joining us today for our Exceptional Educators Playbook. I'm excited that we learned about formative assessment, about what it was, so now we know what it is and how we can use it, and I especially loved the different virtual pieces and that we can use, that and I like how we made that connection that we can use it while we're at home, but then a lot of those techniques we can also use those when we're back in the building, and I think that'll be especially helpful for our kids, so I love that. If you guys want to know more about what we talked about today, then you can find that and more information about our future podcast on our website. So Steph's going to pull that up, and we're going to talk you through how to get there. Go to theholler.org. You're going to hover over the KVEC tab and go down to KVEC Special Education and click on that. And then
It's a beautiful website.
Very pretty.
we're very excited about our
I hear
site.
it's
And then there's
podcast.
a little
I don't know if you see
button,
that from Wanda's head, but
podcast.
that's right.
So under that, that's where we're going to house all of our recordings
And here's
and about our recordings of our podcast and things like that. Again, make sure that you sign in so that you can get on our email serve. If you have any questions, then you want to show our page with our contact information, Steph. If you guys have any questions about anything, do not hesitate to email us. We will be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. I hope that you can join us back in October. We're going to be focusing on progress monitoring. So our next show is going to be October 5th, and that's with literacy, of course. Week 1 is literacy.
Awesome.
So we're going to be talking about what progress monitoring looks like in literacy on October the 5th. So we hope you guys can join us for that. But until next time, we'll holler at you later. All right.
Oh, we